Hi, everyone. Hello, my name is Linda Isaacson, and welcome to today's EMSL LEARN webinar, where we're going to be discussing understanding the double-blind proposal review process. In the chat window, oh, sorry, where's my chat? We're asking everyone, where are you from? Can you let us know where you're at? So, most of us are from EMSL are in Richland, Washington. And I know that one of our panelists is from Colorado and the other one is in DC. So where are you from? Berkeley, California. Excellent. Good to see you, Krista. Thank you. And the United Arab Emirates. Hi, Viva. Good to see you again. And Australia. Thanks, Rika. And Austin, Texas. Thanks, Natalie. Well, New Mexico. Oh, wow. We've got a lot. India and New Mexico. Malaysia. That's excellent. And Texas again. Well, it looks like we've got quite the international community here today. So for today, and again, we're so glad that you're joining us. On June 29th, we are going to have our next EMSL LEARN webinar that will focus on computation, analytics, and modeling resources offered at EMSL. We'll be sharing the link for you to register in the chat for that upcoming webinar. We also encourage you to keep in touch with EMSL by subscribing to our email and our social media channels if you haven't already. The links are also in the chat for you. This is a great way to keep up to date on our open calls for proposals and other opportunities to work with us. And so for today, EMSL's Deputy of User Services, Nikki Powell, is going to give you an overview of EMSL's call cycle, why we're piloting this double-blind review process, what the submission process will look like for anonymized proposals, and how the double-blind peer review process will work. The NREL microbiologist and EMSL peer review panelist, Davinia Salvachua, provide some guidance for proposers on anonymizing your submission. And Dan Evans, the Assistant Deputy Associate Administrator for Research at NASA, is going to discuss NASA's experience and some lessons learned for proposers on their dual anonymous proposal review process, which is similar to this double-blind review process. So there will be time for questions at the end of today's webinar. So we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A portion. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's both a chat thread and then also a Q&A. Post your questions in the Q&A and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of this webinar. And so with that, we're going to begin with Nikki.
Thanks so much, Linda, for that introduction. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. My name is Nikki, as Linda said, my name is Nikki Powell, and I'm the Deputy of User Services for EMSL's user program. And one of the major activities in my role is managing the call proposal process, as well as overseeing the general execution of all of our funded user projects and reporting associated with that. Today, we are excited to share with you our plans to pilot this double-blind peer review process for our exploratory call. I know Linda already introduced our speakers today, but I did want to take a moment to thank both Davinia and Dan for sharing their time and knowledge today. And I think you are all in for a very informative EMSL LEARN seminar. Davinia brings a very unique perspective as both an EMSL user and a peer review panel member. And I think we'll have a lot of great information to share. And I'm also very appreciative to Dan Evans from NASA, who has been more than willing to share his experiences from their program and how their program has proven fundamental changes to funding decisions in NASA's telescope program. So with that, I wanted to just give you a general introduction to, sorry here, my slides have kind of gotten away from me. There we go. Just to kind of set the stage of where we're at, I wanted to kind of give a highlight for those of you who may or may not be familiar with EMSL's user program, what our annual call cycle looks like, which we have externally peer-reviewed panels. We currently have 2 FICUS calls. FICUS stands for the Facilities Integrating Collaborations for User Sciences. These calls aim to accelerate user research projects by providing access to world-renowned user facilities through one single proposal submission mechanism. And as you can see on the screen here, EMSL currently has 2 of these calls, one with the Joint Genome Institute and one with the Atmosphere Radiation Measurement Facility. Both of these calls require a letter of intent. The timeline and dates for these vary a bit, but LOIs are typically due in the late winter, early springtime period. It goes through our peer review process, and award notices are sent out by the end of July for projects that would begin on October 1st. These are typically, depending on the user facilities involved, often last around 2 years in duration. Beyond that, EMSL has its own 2 of its own calls. One is the large-scale research call that seeks to fund leading-edge research activities based on EMSL's 3 science areas in biology, computing, and environmental areas. The call cycle for our LSR, or large-scale research call, follows somewhat similarly to the FICUS call schedule. They also require a letter of intent, and these projects last 24 months in duration, and these also begin at the start of our fiscal year on October 1st. In addition, EMSL also has our exploratory call, which is smaller in scope. The target audience and call topics vary annually, but it is a slightly off the schedule from the other calls that I have just mentioned, and that's what we are discussing today. This call will open very soon. Letters of intent will be due at the end of July, and those projects will start in the December-January timeframe and run just under 12 months for the calendar year. And it is with this exploratory call that we are piloting this double-blind approach. So, oops, getting ahead of my mouse there. So why a double-blind peer review process? Well, as a Department of Energy user facility, EMSL is very much committed to fostering an inclusive culture that welcomes people from all backgrounds and perspectives. And one way we can demonstrate this is by this double-blind review process. And that's probably a reason why you've all taken time out of your day today to find out more about this. Double-blind reviews have been shown to reduce bias and keep the review process based on scientific merit and away from team members' perception, which could enable a bias to enter, whether or not that is implicit or not. This approach has been applied in various research settings, and as we'll learn in more detail from Dan about NASA's approach to this. But it has also been held in other areas such as orchestra audition reviews and other areas in which it's documented that those with the best skills are put forward rather than enabling a preconceived notion of who may or may not be the best qualified. So what are our plans for this double-blind process? And I am continuing to have issues here with my slides. Sorry about that. The process all begins with a letter of intent. EMSL's call will open on June 7th. All the guidance is out on the website, but the LOI will open on June 7th. There'll be roughly a 1-month period in which we'll be accepting LOIs for this call that closes on July 6th. There's really no change to this process for this double-blind pilot. LOIs are required, as I noted, for nearly all of EMSL's calls. This enables EMSL to facilitate planning for the peer review process by selecting peer reviewers who are best able to review the submissions. It also enables us to ensure alignment to EMSL and BER's mission and capabilities. And it also enables a mechanism for users, submitters, to be able to engage with EMSL staff to develop and build strong proposals. All the information regarding an LOI submission can be found on EMSL's website. And there is no change for this pilot to the for the LOI submission. So this is where things start to change. Once the LOIs have been submitted and reviewed, those that are invited for a full invitation, those will go out on August 1st. And with that invitation, PIs and submitters will receive specific guidance on what they need to do to anonymize their proposal for this submission. Again, there is guidance on the website. More information will be provided to PIs. We are planning to have a town hall session as well as opening up virtual office hours for submitters to be able to work with both the user services team and technical staff on developing their proposals. The due date for the full proposal submission is August 31st. And Davinia is going to take a few minutes today to walk you through how a PI would actually go about anonymizing a proposal submission. But before I turn it over to her, I wanted to walk through kind of at a high level the rest of the process for this review. So once the full proposals have been submitted, EMSL staff will screen these submissions as we typically do to make sure they comply with our submission guidance. And they will be sent off to our external peer reviews to conduct their initial review of these. These panel members will only receive the anonymized portion of the submission, and they will conduct their review based on scientific merit, the impact on science, and the resources requested. EMSL is going to do its due diligence to the best extent possible, as we do with our current review panels, to avoid any conflict of interest. And we ask of any peer reviewer who may realize they do have a conflict of interest to let us know immediately so that we can reassign that proposal to another reviewer. And during this time, prior to the meeting, the panel members will be reviewing these proposals and indicating their preliminary scores and providing comments on the proposal. Having lots of problems with my mouse here. Sorry about that. Once we get, not your turn yet, Davinia. There we go. Once the panel actually gets together and convenes, they will be reviewing and discussing the proposals and coming up with a finalized score and comment for each of these proposals. During that time, there will be one person who is in the room with the panel. I'm anticipating we will hopefully be able to do this in person or in a virtual room, whose sole purpose in those discussions of the proposals is to make sure the discussion does not veer towards trying to identify who the submitters are, but keeping the discussion based on scientific merit. And once all the proposals have been discussed, the non-anonymized portion of the submission containing the team members' identities and qualifications will be distributed to the panel review members for a predetermined top portion of those submissions. So not all of them, and this really depends on what our funding availability is for that. At that time, reviewers will have the opportunity to assess the team qualifications for this proposal. The score will not be changed, but it will allow the reviewers to have an opportunity to assess and determine if the team is indeed qualified to do this work. And so once the panel has reviewed and ranked all of the proposals, and we have determined what our available funding is, we will make awards for the exploratory call. And those decision notices are scheduled to be sent on November 30th. So that is kind of a high level overview of what our plans are. And now I would like to turn it over to Davinia from NREL, who will share with you about how to anonymize the proposal.
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for inviting me to give my point of view and also give some advices to the proposers in this specific call. I am Davinia Salvachua, and I am a senior scientist at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Apart from that, I also have two hats. I am an EMSL user, but I am also a participant in the EMSL review panels. But right now I'm going to put the hat of an EMSL user because I would really like to give you some advices about how to write this type of proposals. And let's see, good. Okay, so as typically we do, we are going to include our title, abstract, project description, references, but there is some information that we are going to omit. And that's going to be any information that can identify team members, institutions, partnering organizations, or some of our current or previous work. Related to the team members and institutions, for example, we cannot include any name of the personnel associated with the proposal or their organizational affiliations. And you may think, and how we do that? A co-PI or two co-PIs and different team members. So here you have some ideas. In the work plan, you can refer to individual team members with anonymous wording such as the PI, co-PI 1, co-PI 2, or grad student 1, postdoctoral researcher 2. So there you can get creative on what type of wording you can use. But then related to our current or previous work, probably you are used to write proposals saying based on preliminary data or our prior analysis demonstrated that, or my previous funding. So instead of talking in first person and identifying that type of work that we have previously done, what we can do is just including citations in the references. And in this case, the citations, we're going to include it in brackets. And that's for work that we have previously published. But then you may think, okay, what if we haven't published that information and it's just preliminary data? Here you have in the third bullet point that we can use a different language, such as this data that we have obtained in a private communication or private consultation. And overall, like what we have to utilize is a neutral third person wording. Like we want to avoid utilizing we or I. And here I have like some more examples in the next slide about how we can do that. So in example number 1, you can say that instead of saying our previous multi-FTICR publication revealed, we can say a publication on blah, blah, blah. So that would be the third person. Then in the example number 2, you can see also how we can replace we by a third person, like has recently been published, and how we can utilize instead of our last names in those references, we can include brackets for that reference. And in the example number 3, you have an example of how we can include data that we haven't published before. So instead of saying our preliminary results, we can say data received in a private communication indicate that this is a viable method, for example. So this is just playing with the wording a little bit. And then I wanted to also include here my point of view about this process. As Nikki said, I think this process is going to really reduce the bias, which is going to offer equal opportunities for young and experienced researchers, but also to different genders, race, and countries. And I think we are going to learn more from that in the next presentation. I also think that this type of process is going to really allow us to focus on the science, which is going to also give more chances for a higher probability of innovation. And I really think that also for the reviewers, like this type of process may even enhance or improve the quality of the reviews. And before we move to the next presentation, I also wanted to include few answers to anticipated questions that some of the proposers may have, and also the reviewers. And these questions and responses are very targeted to this process at EMSL. So, for example, in the first bullet point, as you probably know, like the proposers typically can contact the EMSL staff to talk about the resources they would need or the piece of equipment that would better fit their purposes or their research. So we can still do that. We can talk to the EMSL staff, and then the EMSL staff won't provide any information to the reviewers about the submitters. Then which information is going to be then visible to the reviewers? So as I was saying, the title, abstract, requested resources from EMSL, tools and equipment, the project description, and also the references. But if you are submitting a proposal to this exploratory call, you will realize that you are going to submit a single PDF with the anonymous and the non-anonymous sections. So that you may think, what happens with the non-anonymous section? So as Nikki said, EMSL is gonna go through these packages and is gonna extract that non-anonymous sections. So only the anonymous portion is gonna be shared with the reviewers. And then you may think, well, it's a 4-page proposal. I may have an error during the proposal. What happens if I include any error in the writing? So for minor errors, EMSL is gonna allow the submitters to correct it. But if there are extensive errors, the proposal may be rejected without any further review. And then as a proposer submitter, you may think, well, if I don't claim ownership of my past work, if I am then including a bunch of references that are citing my own work, it's not gonna identify or like make obvious my identity. So, well, the reviewers are gonna be asked, try to not to deduce the proposer identities. And even during the review panel, there is gonna be an observer which is gonna avoid that there is any speculation about the team members. And my last slide is about some questions that reviewers could have. Like maybe the reviewers can think, well, but the team qualifications are very important to predict the success of a proposed project. So yes, this is important, but the proposers still have the chance of including in the project description that type of qualification, like relevant qualifications you have for the different research you are proposing. But again, like you cannot share your name, institution, or any information that can identify you. And as Nikki was saying, like the decision about the team qualification, basically yes, no, not about the scores, will be discussed during the review panel. And this is my section, and then here you have it.
Great, thanks very much, Davinia. Pleasure to be here, everybody. My name is Dan Evans. I'm the Deputy Director for Research for NASA's Science Program. We oversee tens of thousands of proposal submissions a year. We give out around about $1 billion annually from our research programs, and that's embedded within an $8 billion budget for NASA Science. So I've been leading NASA's implementation of what we call dual anonymous, aka double-blind peer review, for the past 2.5 years. It's been an absolute pleasure to work on. And I'm just going to give everybody a few highlights about why we did this and what we have learned subsequently. So with a bit of luck, I'm going to advance the slides. Here we go. Okay, so we within NASA's science program are extremely committed to ensuring that the review of proposals is performed in as equitable and as fair manner as we possibly can. And motivated by a very successful pilot by the Hubble Space Telescope team, NASA decided to switch about a dozen or so programs to dual anonymous peer review, double-blind peer review in 2020. And over the next 2 years, we will be expanding that from a dozen to around about 20, all the way up to all 100 programs. So pretty much every single proposal submitted to NASA Science will be evaluated using this promising new dual anonymous technique. And so just to underscore the main purpose of dual anonymous peer review is to ensure that not only are the proposers unaware of the identity of the review panel members, but the reviewers themselves don't have explicit knowledge of those proposers during the scientific evaluation of the proposal. So the motivation is this. It's very, very difficult to completely interrupt bias, specifically unconscious bias, through training alone. And we do a lot. We have various unconscious bias training seminars and so forth. But despite that, we recognize that structural changes were also needed. And an excellent example of dual anonymous or blind evaluations doesn't come from the space science community. It actually comes from elsewhere in life. So back in the 1970s, it turns out that the top orchestras had fewer than 5% women among their members. And so 50 years ago, they literally dropped the curtain between the proposal, between the auditioning members and the conductors and the evaluators. And when they did this, the fraction of women on orchestras shot up. So today it's well into the 30%. So quite a significant improvement, although obviously not parity. It's also not new to behavioral ecology, for example. That scientific journal switched to a double-blind or dual anonymous format several years ago, and that resulted in a huge increase in female first author publications. Now, closer to home, at least for me, is the Hubble Space Telescope, which is one of humanity's most enduring and prolific scientific experiments ever created. It's a truly exceptional tool, and I'm sure everybody has seen stunning images come out from Hubble over the past 30 years. But they had a problem. The problem is this: back in the day, year after year, proposals would come in for telescope time to the Hubble Space Telescope, and they would see that year after year, the success rate of male investigators eclipsed that of female investigators. And they did this based on an inference from first names. But when they switched to a dual anonymous format, that difference went from 5% on average down to around about 1%. So again, not quite perfect, but it did significantly yield a massive decrease in the discrepancies there. And we see something very similar in many of our programs as well, okay? Let's take a look at something that we ran within NASA in 2020. This is the first time that we ran dual anonymous peer review for a program called Astrophysics Data Analysis. This also, as it happens, being a pandemic year, was the first time that we switched to virtual format reviews. Now, back in 2018, these are the blue bars, that we inferred that females constituted around about 26% of the proposing pool, but they landed in the top 2 spots on each panel around about 16% of the time, or the top 3 spots on a panel around about 20% of the time. And then we switched to dual anonymous peer review in 2020. So not only did we see that the fraction of female investigators increased from 26 up to around about 31%, we saw that that the top 2 places in a given panel were populated by females around about 31% of the time, top 3% around about 32% of the time. So just like that, that was the result that made me really highly motivated to switch all of our programs to this new technique. But I should also point out that gender is just one of many factors where unconscious bias could creep in, and there's a whole host more that we're going to get to right now. So here's a good example. So this is the success rate for NASA programs according to the type of institution submitting. This is prior to us switching to dual anonymous peer review. So if you are from a NASA center, or if you are a government contractor, your success rate is something like 24, 25%. Now look to the right, see what happens when you go to an R1 institution, around about 21%. And then further right, a non-R1, R2 academic institution, that's like a small liberal arts college, you're around about 16%. If you're a minority serving institution, you're around about 11%. So it's another example of unconscious bias that we're trying to remedy with double-blind or dual anonymous peer review. Okay, so what we're trying to do is create a level playing field for everybody. And we do this by creating a shift, a change in the tenor of discussions away from the individuals on the proposing team, and actually more towards the proposed science itself. And I can tell you from having sat on many, many panels over the past 2 years for Dual Anonymous, our reviewers walk away and say, my goodness, it was so refreshing to actually think about science for once, as opposed to who's proposing it. But I should also point out that dual anonymous peer review is not a silver bullet. It's not going to rid the world of all unconscious bias. And I always say this when I speak to other science agencies, that dual anonymous peer review should be regarded as one tool in a multifaceted strategy to build an equitable and inclusive and excellent workforce. And these are just a sample of the initiatives that we are pioneering within NASA. So our experience so far is this, that there have been very few egregious violations of anonymization guidelines. Davinia just mentioned a few of them previously. And I think that out of around about, goodness, 2,000–3,000 proposals that we've evaluated using dual anonymous peer review, we've returned without review less than half a dozen, which is pretty good. However, I can tell you from lived experience that we do see common or minor pitfalls around about 10 or 15% of the time. So if you are interested in writing a proposal, take note of what I say right now. Oftentimes we see PIs slip up by claiming ownership of past work. So they would say our previous analysis, or the PI has an established record. Those are no-nos in dual anonymous peer review. Number two, including metadata or PDF bookmarks that reveal the name of the PI. It's very easy to do, but it certainly reveals the names of the investigators. So try and avoid that. Number three, and this is a killer, recycling proposals that were prepared prior to dual anonymous peer review and not carefully anonymizing the text. We see that sometimes. Number four, providing the names of investigators on the contents page. 5, we see this all the time. Providing the origin of travel for professional travel. Or number 6, mentioning the institution name in a budget narrative that you may have to submit. I'm not sure if that's the case with this program. And then mentioning the PI or the COI names in budget tables. Now, again, your mileage may vary according to the type of submission that you're proposing to within this program, but we see this. Now, I'll tell you this, this can all be solved by simply searching for your name and your institution thoroughly through the PDF or whatever submission vehicle you have prior to submitting the proposal. If you take that very simple step, I can almost guarantee that you'll have a compliant proposal. Now, our reviewers absolutely love dual anonymous peer review. Every time we complete a panel, we send out a survey to our reviewers and we ask them how they felt their experience as evaluators went. And we were absolutely overjoyed to see that something like 85–90% of the time our reviewers agree or strongly agree that dual anonymous peer review significantly improved the quality of the peer review, and a similar fraction concur that the majority of proposals on that particular review panel were prepared in accordance with our guidelines for dual anonymous peer review. So it's been a labor of love, but I do think it's been a successful one, and I'm pleased to say that dual anonymous double-blind peer review forms a corner piece of NASA's brand new equity action plan. And we are absolutely proud to be leading this on behalf of the federal science community. And we are overjoyed to see it expanding beyond NASA's reaches into the DOE community. So it's a real delight to see this. I am going to pass it back to Linda now and say thanks very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Hi, sorry about that. I was having difficulty with my camera. All right, so we're going to start with the Q&A at this moment. So we appreciate the time that the research or the speakers have spent talking about the double-blind process. So we did have quite a few questions that came through. So Roxy, just want to let you know, not everyone is spotlighted at this moment. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the first question came from a person who signed on anonymously. Are you concerned about bias entering into the LOI invitation for full proposal process. So I think that one's for you, Nikki.
Yes, thanks. At the LOI stage, we are not concerned. We are not asking anyone to anonymize. The LOIs are not going to be reviewed by our external peer review panel, so there's no concern with that. At the full proposal stage, I think there's certainly a potential for a reviewer to have bias or may be aware of who could be doing this research and proposing it, and has mentioned, but we're going to do our best to make sure that proposal is fully anonymized before it goes on to the peer reviewers, and that we've taken all the steps that we can to remove any identifying information.
All right. Our next question comes from our own Moe Zo. How will anonymity be checked? EMSL versus the reviewers, or manual versus software? I think that's another one for you, Nikki.
So currently we are not modifying our submission process for this call and this pilot, and EMSL staff will be reviewing these proposals and checking for those identifying information. If there are small errors in this pilot, we are anticipating, much as we do when we screen any of our proposal submissions, we have a couple of day of a window in our schedule built in, and that will be following up with submitters. If anyone blatantly does not follow the guidelines, that will not go on to.
All right. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm losing you a little bit. You're kind of blinking in and out for me. Is it? Yeah. Okay. So I think we got what you said, Nikki, for the most part.
Sorry about that. I'm actually in the office today.
Right. All right. Here's another one. It starts with a statement, ends with a question. So double blind feels easier for highly competitive fields, but some research fields may be small, and reviewers with sufficient knowledge in the topic may be able to guess the author based on the science question. Can you comment on how to balance among different fields? And I'm wondering, Dan, did you have any experience in this?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. So, number one, dual anonymous peer review, double-blind peer review, is not designed to be a perfectly anonymous system. It's designed to change the focus of discussions away from the individuals and more towards the science. One thing that we instruct our reviewers is stop playing Sherlock Holmes and trying to guess. That's not your job, okay? But it's a valid point to say that there are some programs that are so specialized that they may not necessarily lend themselves to dual anonymous peer review. I can think of a couple programs within NASA Science where we have no plans to switch. And that's where there are cases where there are literally just like one or two teams in the entire proposing community, maybe even the world, who are capable of producing a proposal that is just so specialized. They may not lend themselves to dual anonymous peer review, but I'd say the vast majority of programs are absolutely credibly performed using this new technique.
All right. Did Nikki or Davinia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't think I did. I think Dan did a great job responding to that.
Okay.
Yeah, me neither.
All right. Okay, so we have another one from Karu. Asked, can the pre-proposal identity collaborating perspective EMSL staff member with whom discussions have taken place, can the pre-proposal identify collaborating I'm sorry, I'm not, can the pre-proposal identify collaborating EMSL staff members with whom discussions have taken place? Okay, yeah. Did you catch that, Nikki?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
For the LOI stage and even the full proposal process, users are encouraged to work with EMSL staff to discuss their proposal and discuss the science that they are proposing and their experimental designs. EMSL staff are not reviewing these proposals as part of the peer review process. And so there's even a place in our user portal submission to indicate what staff you have worked with and communicated with, and that will not change.
All right. So here's a good one too, from Anonymous. What is the budget allocated for each exploratory proposal and also for other ones? So
I can take that one as well. I also just wanted to clarify something going back to the questions about the LOI submission process. We typically have a very high percentage of letters of intent that are invited for a full proposal submission. It's really at that point just to ensure that there is mission alignment and this is valid research that can be done at EMSL. And so I just want to make that clear for everyone. That's not a huge gate in this process. And then the question about the budget for the exploratory call. There is no formal budget that is submitted for these calls as a part of receiving an award for EMSL's exploratory call. There's no cost to you. There is an associated award value that goes with each project that is communicated to each of the PIs. For exploratory calls, it really does vary depending on the scope of work, the type of instrument, the resources that are requested. I would say approximately, with a huge sway there, $50,000 would be an award value for an exploratory call that is less than 1 year in duration.
okay. And here's an easy one too, from Christopher. Do proposers need to anonymize their letter of intent as well?
No, they do not. All letters of intent for EMSL's proposal calls will follow the same guidance, and there is no need to anonymize. Again, that is just an initial cursory review to make sure that it aligns with the work that we are able to do and aligns with BER and EMSL's mission. So no changes are needed for that portion.
Right. Kevin asks, besides gender, do double-blind reviews also improve the funding to established PIs versus early career scientists or postdoc termed scientists? So I don't know, Dan, did you notice any of this at NASA?
Yes, it was an extraordinary surprise to find that prior to double-blind peer review, early career PIs constituted maybe 5 to 10% of our awardees. But following dual anonymous peer review, not only did the fraction of early career proposers shoot up, the fraction of early career awards shot up in lockstep. So that 5% turned to around about 30%. It was something we did not expect, but we were really pleased to see that.
All right. Let's see. So Jeffrey asks, does double-blind peer review also improve the odds for early career scientists? I see this all the time in my program. So let's see. So you just talked to that. Does double-blind peer review improve funding for MSIs compared to R1 universities, considering past exposure to resources at R1s?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
absolutely.
So you may recall halfway through my slide deck, I showed that success rate chart where, you know, like an R1 institution is like 21% and an MSI is maybe like 11 or 12%.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a professor at a small, tiny liberal arts college in central North Carolina. And it's evident that a less resourced institution may not fare as well in any competition, anonymous or not, as a well-established R1 university with a professor with $1 million to start off from an army of postdocs. Now, dual anonymous peer review will, in some senses, remove any institutional bias against smaller fledgling universities, such as that college that I was a professor at, maybe also to MSIs, but I don't think it's going to close the gap completely. Again, it's a question of resources. So I often say that dual anonymous double-blind peer review is a tool of equality, but not necessarily of equity, which is why you really need that multi-pronged strategy to level the playing field.
All right. We have one question left, and we still have just under 15 minutes. So I encourage the audience, if you have any other questions, please post them now, because if there are no more questions after this last one, we may just end this webinar. We may end the webinar sooner than 1 o'clock. Okay, so the last question is from Krista. Did I understand correctly that the top 30 to 50% of proposers are distributed to the review panel members in their de-anonymized forms? Is it the same day of the review, or is it days afterward? Are the panel members expected to review the team qualifications live during the review?
I'll take that one, and then maybe Dan might be able to offer his perspective with reviews done on your end. But that is the plan, and during the discussion of the proposals get ranked, and then that top portion, the team qualifications will be shared with the panel members. And it is not, there is no scoring made for the team qualifications. It is really a review of, are these people capable of doing the work as proposed? So we are not looking for an in-depth screening of the qualifications of the team members, rather a yes, they can do this, or no, we have some serious concerns with that, and not anticipating that we would fall into that area of serious concerns very frequently. But I'd welcome Dan's comments on this.
I have never seen a proposal in that top 30 to 50% that wasn't capable of being executed, because quite frankly, if you're good enough to write a compelling proposal, I would assert that you are more than well qualified to execute it. So in fact, in all the thousands that we've done, we've never seen one in which a well-regarded proposal ever had an unqualified team.
All right. Well, we ended up getting 3 more questions in, so that was great. How do you measure the success of this pilot? Or how are we going to measure the success?
That's a great question. And we currently do not collect a lot of metrics in terms of identifying information of submitters. We will be asking for people to update their profile and provide gender, background, other identifying information, but they're not required to do so. And then we will be providing, looking at statistics, who submits, and what the, based on previous proposals that have been submitted, are we seeing any changes in area with regards to type of institution, gender of PI, early career versus more seasoned career, all of those types of areas. And we'll be sharing that after our pilot and making determinations if this is something that we want to consider doing for our other call proposal types.
All right. So Jeffrey asks, Dan, did the odds for early career folks shoot up in proportion to the fraction applying, or were more of those applying succeeding?
Yeah, in fact, so prior to dual anonymous peer review, I'm going to give you a number. I think 20% of our proposals were regarded as early career, and they only appeared as a 10% pool in our awardees. When we switched to dual anonymous peer review, they constituted 30% of our proposing pool and 35% of our awardee pool. So not only did the number of submitters go up. They actually did a little bit better in the competition. You know, we can debate the sociological reasons for that, postdocs having, you know, more time to write proposals than stress out faculty members, etc. I mean, I've seen many arguments, but I think this is a good thing. I think this is a good thing for the health and vitality of our scientific community to usher new investigators into the pool. And I can tell you, having reviewed the programs, we see excellent science coming out from those early career investigators, truly excellent science. And I think we stand by the process of their selection, no regrets.
Excellent. So this one's from an anonymous questioner. As an EMSL user, what is the key to getting your proposal accepted? How important is discussions with EMSL scientists? Nikki or Davinia?
I'll start with that, and then I'd be curious of Davinia's perspective as well. I think it is extremely important to engage with EMSL staff when writing a proposal. They work with users all the time. They help establish and refine experimental designs, what the question is trying to be answered. And so engaging with them often and frequently is a good avenue for success. And I think having just sat through a recent panel session, it's clear there's very little discussion often for the proposals that rise to the top. They very clearly demonstrate what it is they are trying to achieve very succinctly in that first page even of the proposal. Davinia, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this matter.
I think you have highlighted the most important points, but I don't know, for that people that has not submitted a proposal to EMSL before, I think that communication with the staff is very important, because many times we don't know the pieces of equipment they are developing for certain purposes. So I think that we have like more chances to innovate and even like create a different proposals that we had in mind when we work with the EMSL staff. And then in terms of the proposal, is like any other proposal code. Yes, tell a beautiful story that is understandable and that you can follow. And sometimes preliminary data are important, that we were talking before about how to mention that, but sometimes it's not, like depending on the story you are telling there. And yeah, that's it.
I have another couple questions from one of our most favorite people in the world, Allison Hatt. Hi, Allison, it's so good to hear from you. So she asks, or she says, hi, I'm curious whether Dan or others know of other organizations implementing the double-blind reviews, and if so, what kinds of results are they getting?
Yes, so this started off within the discipline of astronomy and grew to space science and has expanded beyond that. I can tell you that practically every single telescope in the world, professional telescope, now uses a double-blind dual anonymous process. All of NSF's major observatories do. The European Southern Observatory is one. One thing that we were really pleased to see is that double-blind has extended beyond proposal evaluation into journals as well. So a whole bunch of physics journals have actually switched to a double-blind review. As I was looking at this question, I was frantically Googling, and I see that the Journal of Insect Science is now dual anonymous, which is cool. NIH has a whole bunch of high-risk, high-impact innovation programs they've switched. We've had, goodness, half a dozen discussions with NSF about whether or not they are going to make the switch. My hunch is that they will, because I can tell you that Congress is watching NASA's implementation of dual anonymous peer review. They like what they see. And I really think that NSF, in part or in whole, will end up following suit. And what results are they seeing? They're seeing results very similar to us. I would say and confess that their analyses are far more statistically robust than ours, but despite our lack of robustness in comparison, all of them say the same thing, that the unconscious bias is massively reduced, but not quite entirely swept away. That proposers and indeed people who are submitting journal articles have actually become relatively quickly accustomed to the new system. And the reviewers on the other side of the table actually really enjoy this new technique, and a very, very few complaints. So I think we've all seen something very similar. There's a Nature article that I will drop in the chat in a second if you're interested.
All right. Well, and Allison had one more follow-on question too for you, Dan. How has NASA's funding agency responded to the dual anonymous review?
NASA is a funding agency. So, you know,
Okay.
I would say that beyond NASA science, which is, you know, around about a third of NASA, dual anonymous is taking off for other bits of NASA, notably in our technology directorate. They're spinning up multiple pilots. And I think what's really galvanized our response and really encouraged us is that the agency on high has recognized that this is a really key tool for how we evaluate proposals. And as I mentioned previously, it's really forming the cornerstone of our new equity action plan, which we released, I think, last month in response to President Biden's EO on STEM equity. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's it for questions. We haven't had any new questions come in, and we are about 3 minutes until the end of this time. So I guess that's a wrap. So thank you again, Davinia, Dan, Nikki, for your time today. We're super excited about this new pilot, and we're excited for everyone, for the users as well. You know, we're hoping that this will be a game changer for EMSL and for you. So yeah, have a great day today. And don't forget to check out for our webinar at the end of this month, June 29th, on computing, analytics, and modeling resources offered at EMSL. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.